Senator Matt Canavan, thanks for joining us on Flow today.
Good to be here, Rikki.
Now, you made some comments about carbon sequestration with farming and what that's going to do to our abilities to, for instance, reach $100 billion in agricultural production by 2030. What are you saying about carbon, soil carbon, and farmers going into that?
Well, my concern with this stuff is that quite often to get these carbon offsets, farmers have to lock up their land and not develop it. That's what's happening a lot in Western Queensland, that big companies like Qantas are offering to pay farmers to just let their land stay as it is and not develop it. Now, that's good for the farmer, obviously. Good luck to him. He gets a check. But for our nation, that means we're not going to grow our food development to that $100 billion if we keep this up. And for the surrounding communities, it's devastating because if a farmer gets a check for doing nothing, that means that there won't be jobs for jackaroos and jillaroos. There won't be the need for mechanics to service tractors and other equipment. And even right down to local shops and cafes, once there's no jobs for those people, the whole town gets hollowed out. And so I want to see our country get to that $100 billion. I want to see us grow and develop our farming and food lands. I think it's important for the world that we do that. But a lot of these policies would threaten such a goal and take away our opportunities to grow more food.
Yeah, and I've been looking at the ABARES data, and it has been done before, actually. This 7.5 years till 2030, we have actually gone as much as 40% or more increase in production over that period. So it can be done if we keep the settings the way they have been in the past. But we're looking at some settings where we've got a few sort of an arm tied behind our back.
Absolutely, Rikki. I mean, you're right. You're absolutely, the goal is achievable. We often have had significant growth in farming, but that's come on the back of building more dams, opening up more areas for development. And, of course, then to reach a $100 billion target, a lot's going to depend on the price and what people are willing to pay for our produce. So I'm confident we will get significant growth in demand for our commodities, but that's a little out of our control. What we can control is the land under development, the regulatory environment for farmers to take those risks. And right now, it's really hard to develop any country. You've got to keep in mind that the reason we're meeting our carbon emission targets is because we have locked up so much land and taken property rights off farmers. If you have a look since 1990, every sector of our economy has increased its emissions. Electricity, industry, transport have all increased its emissions. The only sector that has reduced its emissions is what's called land use, and that means farmers. And farmers have reduced their emissions. That's the only reason. So whenever you hear and there's politicians saying Australia has reduced its carbon emissions, not Australia's done that. It's the farmers have done that, and we've done that by having a lot less land under development than we did 30 years ago.
I suspect that colours the argument about zero carbon requirements or additional savings in agriculture that I guess yourself and a number of nationals have been pushing for. When it comes to the agricultural productivity targets, do you think there might be some creative accounting used there to count soil carbon sequestration towards those targets? Do you think anyone's going to go down that path?
Well, that's a really good question, Rikki. Look, I'm not a scientist on this stuff. I'm reporting and can see the impact so far and the complaints I hear so far about land being locked up. But I have looked at some of this science, and there are a lot of different views on the extent to which soil carbon can actually lower atmospheric carbon emissions over time. There's no doubt that some things you can do, less fertiliser use, etc., will potentially lower carbon emissions in the short term. But there's then a question of where the equilibrium gets to over time in soils, and will that actually over the long term reduce it? You know, this stuff can be very rubbery, of course, and you can understand if there's someone who has a check out there, if someone's willing to pay you to do something, even if it's nothing and does nothing, you can understand where the farmers want the money. But for our whole society and community, we've got to stop wasting money on things that don't contribute to productivity or produce wealth. We've seen over the last year, we've had to pay a lot of people just to sit at home and not do anything, and that was right and proper, to keep people in their homes, to make sure they weren't chucked out in the streets. But you can't keep that up forever. No nation can do that. We've got $1 trillion in debt now. We actually need to focus on things that make money, that produce things, not just thin air.
Yeah, and that's my point about the clever accounting that might be used to say, hey, look at that, voila, we've reached the 100 billion target. If we include in that farmers getting paid to sequester carbon or other methods to keep, if they get paid to farm carbon, in effect, suddenly you get to those targets. And the reason I ask that is because the total ag production figure, I think, includes forestry. And you've talked before about planting trees. That could be a way of getting there.
Well, forestry, to the extent, I'd need to look at these figures, Rikki, but most of those forestry amounts surely would be the sale of logs, to people to produce wood or wood products. And that's absolutely fair. That's included. The issue here, I think you're getting at, which is a correct one, is do we want our farmers focused on producing something of value to others, like food, like forestry, wood products, etc., or do we want them producing stuff of value to governments? That's the key question here, right? Like, is our farming sector, is our private enterprise focused on individual needs and what people need to feed themselves, to clothe themselves, cotton production, etc., or should it be focused on servicing the needs of governments, be they here or around the world, or large corporations like Qantas? And I'm worried about that latter route, because I don't think we want our production planned by governments or state actors. That's communism, and that doesn't work. And two, it's really risky for business too. I think you've got to be really worried about if your business model is based on laws passed in Canberra. I don't know if you spent much time in Canberra, but I wouldn't want a business model based on that, because politicians can be quite fickle. People can, parliaments can change, elections can happen, and suddenly your business model might be completely out the window with just a change of the law. Whereas, of course, if you're producing a high-quality food product or a high-quality fibre product, there'll almost always be a customer there for it. You might have to change customers. Some countries might close off, but you've spread your risk over 7, 8 billion people now, not just the 200 odd people in Canberra making laws.
Now, I just wanted to ask also about, Widges has done some quick calculations about solar farming. Looks like there's about 10,000 megawatts online or coming online in the current plans. Now, it takes about a hectare to grow, if you like, solar farming opportunities. So you're looking at 10,000 hectares potentially going out of agricultural production to farm solar and to produce energy. Should that be going on prime agricultural land, in your view?
That's a great question, Rikki. I was just out in central Queensland a few weeks ago with some farmers very concerned about this issue. No, it should not. It should not. Solar farms should not go on prime agricultural land. We've only got so much prime ag land, and that should be saved for feeding ourselves and feeding others around the world as we do. The guidelines in Queensland, at least, and I don't know about other states, but the guidelines say that solar panels should not go on prime ag land. Unfortunately, they're just guidelines, and they don't seem to be being enforced at all. So there's a proposal near where I am to lock up 2,000 hectares of land to put solar panels on. Not all those 2,000 hectares are what you'd call prime land, but some of it is good black soil agricultural land. And why would you put bits of glass over the top of that when it's just beautiful soil that could grow food for everybody? There's got to be clearer laws on this. This is an emerging issue that I think deserves better inquiry. I'm pushing a little bit for some inquiries in Canberra made about this issue, not just on the issue of prime ag land, but just generally the land use requirements of renewable energy. It's not just the wind turbines and the solar panels. It's also the massive transmission lines that need to be built to hook up these places. There's a lot of growing opposition in parts of rural Victoria to these schemes, where people are just having massive parts of their land taken over by easements for transmission lines and not even getting paid for it.
That's what we've got in our broadcast area, the interconnector to go between South Australia and New South Wales. That's excitement about that in South Australia, but it's going to go over some important land there. And so too with renewable energy wind farms and solar farms in Western Victoria. Now there's transmission lines needed to go over those. Some potato farmers have painted some pretty colourful messages on their sheds for local member Catherine King. Yeah,
well, look, as I say, I'm picking up around the countryside. We just need to make sure that people are respected through these processes. I fear, I'm pro-development, and I'm happy to see renewable energy developed, but I fear that the problem we often have in society is if you want to know who's probably committing the gravest sins, you probably look at who's considered to be the angels, right? And the angels right now in our society are renewable energy. They're the saviours, they're the Messiah. And it's often those groups that then feel that they can get away with more. And I must say, my dealings with renewable energy companies I have a lot to be desired.
And you were a former
compared to, say, mining companies where, they seem to be the devil.
Yep.
And so they go above and beyond to try and, usually, not always, they're not all perfect, but they usually go above and beyond to try to help their local communities because they're worried about the backlash. Whereas renewable energy companies feel like they can get away with blue murder, so often they try.
And you were former resources and energy minister, weren't you? So you'd know pretty close hand.
Oh, I've had dealings with all of these, and that's just my experience. And I want to stress, there's good and bad in both camps, right? There's bad mining companies. But as a rule, I just fear when society puts some people up on a pedestal, it's often those that take the greatest fall. And right now, we are putting renewable energy companies on a pedestal and treating them as if they can do no wrong, and that's really dangerous. They are big companies. They're seeking to make a lot of money. They should be scrutinised and held to account just like any other large corporation in this country.
Because you've mentioned that, I have to ask, because we used an analogy yesterday on the morning show about wind, and we were looking at the national energy mix, where 70% of what Australia used in the last 12 months was from brown and black coal. And we used the analogy, it's a bit like in Aussie rules, you have a guy who likes taking specky marks in the forward line, but the real hard, the back line, the ones that are doing the hard work is coal. That's the backbone of the energy mix. And maybe for you, the analogy is more like the front rowers is coal. And
I was about to say that, mate. I completely went over my head. But but the front rowers are they're the people.
Everyone's cheering on the wind on the wing. They run and do the flashy stuff on the wings. But isn't it coal?
Or in golf, mate, it's you drive for show, you putt for dough, right? So
is that what's happening?
You're a good driver, but that doesn't make any money.
Coal is the driver in our energy mix, and that doesn't seem to be going away.
No, it's the putt. It's the putt. The putting is what wins you the game, mate, or the short game. So.
But is that fair to say the coal is well and truly doing the heavy lifting here, and it's going to be doing it for a very long time to come by the looks of it? That's
exactly right, Rikki. There's over the last few months in particular, if it weren't for the coal industry, our lights would have gone off. We've had a very tight electricity market. In fact, in New South Wales and Queensland, we've had record prices because of that tightness in the market. And still, you see at night time, in, say, New South Wales, you're getting 80, sometimes up near 90% of power being produced by coal. And so when everyone goes to buy their electric cars, how are they going to get charged? Because a lot of people want to charge them at night, understandably, when they're not probably driving. They'll park them in their garage and hook them up to their power supply. How are they going to be charged? Because it's not going to be from solar at night. Batteries won't last that long, not to go over the whole night. And wind is up and down. Sometimes it's on at night, sometimes it's not. But I don't think you want your next morning's commute to be dictated to about whether it was windy the night before.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to have to keep prosecuting this debate about energy and where all the energy is actually coming from, because there's a lot of feelings that are moved by this debate, but the facts seem to point to the fact that coal's going to be here for some time to come.
Yep, that's right, mate. No doubt about that.
All right, Senator Canavan, thanks so much for giving us some time to talk about these things today. Appreciate it.
No worries, Rikki. Have a good day, mate.